Hello, everybody. Welcome back to Read and Reread. I am Angelia, and today it's time for Friday Reads. It is January, I never know, January the 27th. We're almost at the end of the month. So that means that my Tuesday video will be a wrap up video. But today, let's talk about what I read this week. Well, first of all, let's review television shows. We finished Station 11. That one's on HBO Max, and that was pretty good. Um, Neither of us had read the book for quite a while, like when it was a new book. So we thought we were foggy enough on the details to not be too hung up on book versus movie, but we did keep thinking of things and thinking, well, was that person, that big of a character and stuff like that? And it really did diverge a lot from the book. And it was still a good show. I kept wondering, what would someone make of this if they had never read the book? Because it's a pretty weird story anyway. I did not like one aspect of the ending. There was one aspect I did like that was a change, and another that I did not, because I felt like there was a character that everyone conveniently forgot about some of the things this character had done when it got to the end. But that's all I'm going to say. I did enjoy it. Then last night we started watching The Essex Serpent. I have not read the book that this show is based on, so I have no frame of reference. If you've read the book, The Essex Serpent, or seen this show, leave me a comment in down below about your thoughts about this. But we just only saw the first episode, and we were intrigued. It is about a woman in the Victorian times, I think near the end of the 19th century, and played by Claire Danes. And her, at the very beginning, this is not a spoiler because this is like the very first scene, her husband, who apparently was abusive, passes away, and she is a naturalist. She has a very keen scientific mind, which of course has not been encouraged in her time period. And she decides to go and investigate these reported sightings of a big sea serpent in Essex that is attacking livestock and causing other havoc in this little community. And anyway, she gets there and some weird stuff is happening, but that's as far as it has gotten. Several main characters are introduced, and we shall see what happens. But the first episode was good. I'm interested to see what happens. All right, so on to the reading. When I last spoke of my reading, I had begun Demon Copperhead by Barbara Kingsolver, and that I did finish reading this week. And I went through a lot of different phases while I was reading this book. So I'll cut to the chase. It's really good. When I got to the end, I was really glad I'd read it, and it's a really good book. I had sort of a dangerous passage in the middle. So some of my thoughts about Demon Copperhead. So we have a story here that I guess is inspired by David Copperfield, which I have not read. And it's about a boy in Appalachia who seriously cannot catch a break and just endures one hardship after another in his short life up to the time of the telling. And he is telling it from an adult perspective, a young adult, college age-ish perspective, but looking back on a story that happens when he is growing up with first his mother and then a series of foster homes. And the early part of the story, where Demon is a little boy, my main emotion was anger because so many adults let him down, chose to look past situations, chose to not really hear. No, I can't say they didn't hear what he was saying, because he kind of chooses not to lay everything out. Although a few times he does and he's not listened to. So he kind of gives up on the unvarnished truth and begins to figure out, well, what's the best thing I can do to cope? Like, maybe this bad situation, I don't want to trade this in for the unknown because it could be worse. So he starts to tell adults what they want to hear, and they're okay with that too. And there are some people that are important in his life that are part of this squad of not really stepping up folks. And there's a couple of characters that I had a problem with all the way through the story that just, I don't know, underperformed as far as Demon is concerned. So that was my primary emotion. Then it gets into his teenage portion of the story, and then I'm just like intensely depressed and frustrated because he's just going down this predictable path, and all of um, the things that you would imagine might befall a young man with limited circumstances in Appalachia are occurring. Some of them are, he participates and makes some bad choices and all, but all that's kind of just a setup, like for things to go wrong. And he, at this point in his life, the people he has some people who truly do care about him, and again, they try to point out to him things that he isn't seeing in himself, his own worth, his value, his talents, and he has a hard time seeing those things for himself. And then we move on. So that in that part of the book, I thought, if this is it, if we're just going slowly circling down through a toilet, I'm going to be really pissed when I get to the end of this book. But there is kind of a third act, and I don't want to give spoilers, but um, without being, I didn't think that it was unrealistic. I thought that this is the story that some people have to tell. And so I liked the way things were going at the end of the story. I don't want to say too much. There's humor, even though it's really depressing. The way that he tells the story often, I think Kingsolver tried to represent an American reality that is often underportrayed, only shown as a snapshot of horrible living, or as a joke, or as a caricature. And this is discussed several times in the story. Demon becomes aware of this. There's a friend in Demon's life that tells him, trust the wild ride at one point, and he takes this up as a little bit of a mantra when he's thinking about taking a risk, or he's not sure what's going to happen. Sometimes this is bad timing that he thinks of this, and sometimes it's good, but I felt like I had to trust the wild ride to continue reading the book all the way through, that I would be happy when I got to the end. Not happy like, oh, everything's great, but just happy, like hopeful, and just the whole arc of his story. And I loved the characters. Angus, I loved Tommy, I loved Mr. Dick. There's all kinds of joke opportunities there. But and I loved the two teachers, the two married teachers that reach out to him as well. But so those characters really stood out. Even some of the horrible characters, the descriptions and the way that they are developed are also really memorable. But anyway, I really did care for this book a lot, and I was happy that I read it. And it moved pretty fast. It's a long book, but even though I kind of had to slow down in the middle because it was just so heavy, but I did read it pretty quickly. So it's not really a slog. Okay, but after that, and in light of the fact that I had read a couple of books in a row that had pretty heavy themes, and then when I looked at my TBR pile, it was more like serious topics and heavy stuff on the horizon. But I needed to have a mental palate cleanser. And sometimes when I need that, I read like a mystery, like a thriller. Kind of did that last time when I read The 2 Nights in Lisbon. But then other times I read something just a little bit lighter in tone. There's a few authors that I kind of rely on for that. I decided to read the new book by Emma Straub, This Time Tomorrow. And you can let me know in the comments if you've read any of her books, or if you've read this book. I've read a few of her other books that I liked. My favorite one is The Vacationers. I did see that All Adults Here, which I think was her book just before this one, is going to be made into a show, so that could be good. But I picked this up at the library. I saw that it was a time travel novel, And I knew that it would probably be lighter in tone than Demon Copperhead, so I decided to give it a chance. And it was okay. It wasn't my favorite of her books, and it wasn't as good as I hoped it was going to be. This book was about a woman named Alice who is turning 40, and her life is going fairly well. She has a rent controlled apartment that she's been in for years and years. She has a decent boyfriend. She has a job that she's been at for a long time as an admissions director at a private school that she used to attend as a child. The only thing that's really wrong in her life is that her father is slowly deteriorating in the hospital, and he's probably going to pass away pretty soon. They've never really quite pinpointed what exactly is wrong with him, but he has been slowly declining. And so that's like the sadness in her life. She has her childhood best friend is still her best friend. Her friend is married and has kids. Alice has remained single, but she's not particularly concerned about it. And on the eve of this 40th birthday, she accidentally time travels. So, to cut a long story short about the events of that evening, she wakes up and she is in her dad's apartment where she grew up, and she's 16 again. It is her 16th birthday. She's in her 16-year-old body. Her dad is young, and she remembers events of that day, but she's in her 40-year-old mind. And one of the things I really loved about this part of the story is that she gets a hold of her best friend Sam, and when she tells Sam what is going on, Sam is like, okay, well, that's some crazy stuff. What are we going to do? And Sam immediately goes into like problem solving mode, and she just doesn't even question that this could not happen. She's just like, wow, okay then. And she just starts to help Alice. Um, but so she figures there must be something about this day that maybe she's supposed to play it a different way. And so there is a time travel trope in here where you are trying to see what little thing might help a future outcome. And so she really would like to see if there's something she could do to make things different for her father. And it does do the trope of trying multiple times to fiddle around with the time continuum and see what happens on the other side. I'm not going to tell you the details about how the time travel works or the different things that happen or some other side characters, but so that I liked. And also it's kind of fun that her dad was a novelist who wrote a super popular kids time travel book that was made to a TV show, and so he's been living for decades off of the royalties. And he goes to science fiction conventions and all that kind of stuff. But so all that is what I liked. What I did not like was the predictability. There was quite a few things where I was like, oh, here comes this and here comes that, and the way a person would appear, and you'd be like, well, okay, I know how their role in this little saga kind of bore too much resemblance to other similar stories. And although I will say some of the things that I thought might happen did not. So there wasn't anything real fresh or surprising here, but it was okay. And as far as trying to just read a lighter book before I embarked on something else more challenging, I enjoyed it, but I didn't think it was her strongest book. So that was This Time Tomorrow by Emma Straub. It was okay. Then that brought me up. I finished that yesterday morning, and so that brought me up to the rest of Thursday. And I knew that today I need to run over and pick up some holds at the library, and they're holding for me Lucy by the Sea. So and I know I want to read that next. So I didn't want to start another book that I had around the house yesterday. So I decided to just dip around and read some poems and short stories. And I pulled out this old honker, Literature and the Writing Process. It's a big anthology that I've had for millions of years. I actually have 2 editions of this book. And I think it was because I took a class and then I took another class and they had changed the edition and they added and subtracted some of the literature, so I had to buy it again. But they're really good anthologies, and I have used them ever since, for decades, when I just want to reread certain famous short stories or poems. So I tiptoed around in this book and I read some Emily Dickinson poems that I particularly like. Since it's been kind of cold and gloomy the past couple days, I wanted to read There's a Certain Slant of Light, Winter Afternoons. And then I read a couple of short stories. I read one that I have never read before called The Pedestrian by Ray Bradbury. And that was a pretty fun and weird science fiction story. Is basically the whole story is this guy is just walking at night in his neighborhood, and he has been walking at night for years, and he walks past all the houses, and he says he never encounters anyone else on his walks, and he sees all the people inside the houses watching TV. And the story was written in 1951, and there's some comments in there about the people just being glued to their TVs and nobody ever comes outside. And then it turns out, I don't want to give it all away, but we find out eventually that it is in the future, and that his act of walking is actually a radical activity. Okay, I had to just take a minute there. I feel like I've been talking really fast. I don't know why. Maybe I'm all excited about these books. Whew. So I haven't really read a lot of Ray Bradbury. I have to confess, I think I read a couple of short stories, and I read, I guess, Fahrenheit 451 like 1,000 years ago in school. But let me know what else I should read, because I was pretty intrigued by that story. Now I feel like maybe I've been sleeping on Ray Bradbury. So then the other short story that I read was an old favorite, which is A&P by John Updike. And again, I'm not like a huge Updike fan. I've really only read a few short stories and one novel, which wasn't any of the famous ones. I think it was The Centaur, which I read for a class and I did not love. And that was back in the 80s. So again, if I am asleep at the wheel, somebody can let me know. But one of my all-time favorite short stories is A&P by John Updike. And if you've ever read this story, we have a 19-year-old narrator who's a clerk at the grocery store, and it is written in 1962, and he is immature, and he is misogynistic, and he is annoying. But I love this story, and it's funny, and the descriptions are so great, even the really irritating ones. So it has one of the great opening lines in literature, in my opinion, which is, "In walks these three girls wearing nothing but bathing suits." Oh, no, I said it wrong. Let me try again. "In walks these three girls in nothing but bathing suits." And so the whole story, which is very short, is about when he is working at the checkout, and these three girls come in their swimsuits. The men working in the store are all aghast in various ways about these girls in their swimsuits who've come in for a jar of pickled herring snacks. The other line that I really love, or a couple of lines in here, is when there's three girls, and one of them asks about the herring snacks. And when she speaks, he says, "All of a sudden, I slid right down her voice into her living room. Her father and the other men were standing around in ice cream coats and bow ties, and the women were in sandals, picking up herring snacks on toothpicks off a big glass plate. And they were all holding drinks the color of water with olives and sprigs of mint in them. When my parents have somebody over, they get lemonade, and if it's a real racy affair, Schlitz and tall glasses with 'They'll do it every time' cartoons stenciled on them." So he has attributed this entire upscale fantasy life to this girl based on her asking where the herring snacks are in the store. And the story is short, concise, beautifully written, and I do love it. All right, so that was it. I read 2 books, and I scooted around through this anthology and picked out odds and ends. And I need to remember this. This is a great in-betweener, is to just pull out some stories and poems. And so I know I found something old and I found something new. So, what are you up to? What did you read this week? Please let me know your thoughts on anything that I talked about in this video, or some different reading that you did, or suggestions that you have. I love comments. I'm going to go pick up Lucy by the Sea, and that will be my weekend book. I think it'll go pretty fast. I saw it in the bookstore and it wasn't very thick, and her writing's not very dense. So I think that'll be a quick one. And then I need to look around in my cart and see what is going to happen next. And I am excited. I'm waiting also for the BookTube judging announcement, because I signed up to do that in the fiction division. And I should find out on February 1st if I was selected in the first round of judging. And that will affect my February lineup. So before I make a February TBR video, I need to see whether or not my name comes up in that group, because then there'll be some books that I need to read for sure. Anyway, that's all for now. Hope you have a great weekend. I'll talk to you soon. Thank you for liking this video. Subscribe if you have not. And thank you to all my subscribers. And hello to the new people. Several people signed this week. So I'm happy you're here. Have a good weekend. I'll see you soon. Bye-bye.